welcome to Her Drive, the show where we spotlight women who take the untamed path towards purpose, healing, and embodied leadership. I'm your host, Cynthia Cramblet, intimacy coach, energy alchemist, and curious spirit who has the honor to talk with so many amazing women. Today's guest is Wendy Strgar, award-winning entrepreneur and founder of Good Clean Love, Vaginal Biome Science, and Womankind Care. A true innovator in women's health, Wendy developed biomatch technology, a science-based approach to supporting the vaginal microbiome. She's also helped shape industry standards on product safety and ethics through her work with the FDA. If this conversation resonates, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who's ready to reconnect with their own vitality. Without further ado, hi, Wendy. Welcome to Her Drive.
Thank you so much for having me, and what a nice introduction. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely come with a lot of accolades, a lot of success, and a lot of beautiful innovations that I, as a woman, so appreciate and am so curious about. And I'm really honored to have you. So it means a lot.
Well, thank you. Yeah, when you list it all out, I'm like, geez, that's why I'm so tired now. Uh, I I've been working for so many years at this, really my whole adult life, truthfully. So I don't know what you want to know. How I came to start this, maybe, is like what a lot of people wonder. Why did
Sure.
you do this? You know,
Yeah.
partly, I feel like, generally speaking, the most important innovations that we look at in our lifetime were always driven by necessity, right? So, entrepreneurs who wake up to something because something calls them, they have a need they can't fill, or then it turns out that the need is a need everybody has. Those are the most successful ones. And I didn't know that I was tumbling into that after I had my fourth child. And I mean, anybody who has four live births would have issues like these. We're only starting to really talk about just how big a sort of the reproductive process, what that does to the human body. I mean, now we start to look at why so many women still die in childbirth, but historically, like, really did, because it's like, really, you're right on the edge of life and death. And so when you do that four times in a row, um, your organs aren't in the same places after. And so yeah, I really needed products to maintain my intimate life with my husband. And I knew that if I didn't, I would repeat my parents' divorce. I didn't want to do that. So I was really, really highly motivated to try to find solutions, first for my sexual health issues. And then as I was aging, because I was 37 with my last child. So I was pretty quickly moving into perimenopause. And then all those other vaginal issues that were kind of culminating sort of exploded as my estrogen levels wavered. And so that's how it all happened, right? Like, I have always been trying to treat myself, honestly. And then, of course, I have all these kids. I'm on the soccer fields, at flute recitals, all the things. And it turns out every mother I know has these problems. Um, so um, so that's how it happened. And I'm naturally kind of like you, inquisitive. I kind of was into natural healing early on. And I knew that when I was trying to make products in my own kitchen, that there's so many ingredients that are in products that I would never have in my kitchen. And so I'm like, why would I have it in my sort of most sensitive tissue in my body if I wouldn't even have this in my kitchen? Um, and that's kind of how the journey kind of evolved over time.
Yeah. Well, I love what you said in regards to solving a problem for yourself. And just last week, I was talking with two of my nieces and nephews who I was telling them about my business, and they said, "We want to start businesses. How do we do it?" And the advice I gave them was, well, find a problem that needs to be solved for yourself and see if there's a lot of other people who need that problem solved too. And you might have some success in your business. So hearing you, you share that
It's
brings me
true.
back to
And,
that moment. Yeah.
I tell that to my children too, right? Like, I mean, work really is a form of love if you're lucky. if you're really lucky. And I do feel really blessed to have been able to work for so many years in my life for something that means, like, doesn't just mean something to me personally, but, when you think about, I just mentioned this yesterday, you know, especially with the current administration and how things have tipped away from women's rights and women's agency over their own bodies in so many ways. And then you sort of zoom out and you look at that on a global scale. I really feel like there's a way in which my work in women's health is like really healing the earth itself, right? Like the way we treat women and the way we sort of think about women on this planet is why we're so sick. It's why things are so violent, and so I really think everything that everyone does to lift up the truth of who women are is what will heal this planet. I don't know if it's too late, but I really think that and teaching each other what love is, because a lot of times I'll say this to people, and then the thing that occurs to me frequently is just how often women don't trust other women or are really judgmental of other women, right? So when I was home taking care of my kids, I was lucky that I could stay home with them for these years that I really wanted to be with them. I was so the Jewish overbearing mother, right? And so they were really happy when I started a business. They're like, "Fine, mom, go do something else," um, but then other women would be like, "Oh, why aren't you working too?" Right? And the same thing, like the stay-at-home moms would be like, "Oh, they're abandoning their kids," right? Like we just can't be nice to each other about these hard choices that we face. And you just see that in so many ways now, right? Like, and I had two daughters, and God, the way girls are mean to each other. Boys are never like that when they're little. So I just, I just wish for all of us that we could be more curious, like all the things you introduced the show with, right? More curious and more compassionate um, when we meet people, when we don't know really how it is to walk in their lives. So I feel like I get to do this really important scientific work. That's really at the foundation of what it means to be female, vaginal microbiome science. And I also get to really create a lot of solutions that I'll interview some of my customers on, just the way you're interviewing me, and they'll just literally break down and cry, for like what's happened to them, and like just how bad the care has been, and that like started using our products and they really literally get better. Um, so yeah, I'm very blessed to have had this life to do
Yeah,
this work.
absolutely. Well, I hearing you share a bit of that really makes my heart just expand 15 times bigger than it already is. So thank you very much. And I truly align with what you're saying in regards to the way in which the earth is suffering and being treated based on, well, the suffering based on how she's being treated is very representative of each individual female, right? And if we are trashing our planet and extracting from her and raping her and not really caring,
The
how are we
same.
actually, it's the same, it's the exact same. And I do think as the feminine rise, as wealth transfer occurs and women position themselves to actually take hold of financial control in some ways and come into their awakening of their heart, their body, their mind, their spirit, everything connected together, I do believe that there's hope. But I do a lot of energy work, and Mother Earth has come to me a few times. And the last time I did work on Mother Earth, I just felt all of this like just heat and pain and suffering all over
Yeah.
her. And I knew it wasn't necessarily the people. I've felt that, but it was like literally the pain of our planet because it's a living
I mean,
being.
and just whatever. Just
Yeah.
choose one thing.
Yeah.
Fracking, like, you know what I mean? Like, okay, who fracks? Like, and doesn't expect it to create a massive response,
Sure.
or even mining for these minerals, like what we do. It's just,
Yeah,
and
it's pretty
and
baffling.
there's women in many many countries that are treated like property, and or worse,
Yeah.
honestly. And
Mhm.
it has to stop. It just has to stop.
I agree.
So
And I don't want to derail us too much from talking about you and your work, but I do think it's important for the audience to hear about these subjects and know that, especially if you're listening to this podcast or ones like it, you're probably living in a Western society, more privileged, have some access to choices. And it's important to know that we lead the charge for the future of humanity for women around the world. For those women, say, I don't know, the 2 million in a year who are they're vaginally mutilated,
yeah,
right? They don't have a choice, and I get
little
really upset.
girls. I mean, little
Yes,
girls.
yes,
No, I
exactly.
know. And the thing about it is like, how do we? This is why I was saying about compassion and curiosity, because mothers bring their daughters to do that, right? And women do that to little girls. So it's like how, and they really have come to believe over decades that if a woman can feel pleasure, she is unclean. And so, I mean, just those stories that are like, like as old as the earth, right? That like that we're, I mean, it's like the power of female sexuality and the fact that we give life, I think has been so terrifying to men for, for such a long time, that this is kind of where it's brought us, with these billions of people on our planet. And so it's like, I just think everything, like you're saying, that we do individually, anytime that I have orgasmic sex, I send it out as a prayer, you know, uh, that it's healing, because I mean, I'm a goddess worshiper anyway, but, when I don't know what to do, I just pray more. So yeah. But let's just get back to sexuality, human sexuality and female sexuality, and the importance of the microbiome and all of that. So like I said, I started because I was really trying to save my own sex life and my marriage, right? And so happy to report 40 years later, that's still working. Um, and I think that the fact that I can have an amazing sex life after 40 years of marriage makes me like an expert enough to sort of do a TED talk or, come on a podcast. There's a lot of things I've written about in books about sex, so, I'll just say a couple that I think are really important. So one I think is that, so many women have vaginal pain. That's not just pain with sex. And this is sort of part of my journey that I realized that when I was just trying to sell sexual health products. And I would talk to so many women, they're like, why are you trying to get me to have more sex? And I was like, well, it's going to be good for you. It's not just good for him, it's good for you. Well, then it became clear, well, no, it's not if I'm like in pain already there. Right. So then I started really inquiring into that. And, it's true. Tens of millions of women are in pain vaginally for one reason or another, like for many, many years of their life, many years of their life. And our response to that medically is entirely inadequate. We persist in doing the same standard of care that we've done since I was born, so over 60 years, which is leading with antibiotics, even though we know that antibiotic resistance is a really scary problem on this planet. And instead of really trying to understand why those antibiotics are not working because the conditions are so recurrent or they just persist, right? They're chronic. Instead of really getting into the data of what's happening, we just give them longer. we, we just have women who are pregnant on antibiotics for their whole pregnancy, which is literal insanity. And then when we've ruined the tissue, right, that very sensitive mucous membrane with all this antibiotic use, then we give them steroids. Right. So that's it. That's like the number 1 and 2 treatments, and hormones, right? We like disrupt their endocrine system and we give them these hormones that supersede their hormones, which actually creates infertility in a lot of women. It's not really tied that way over time, but endocrinology is a science that we have yet to really, really give ourselves to. Certainly, we know that it has a lot to do with all of the endometriosis, PCOS, many, many conditions that impact millions of women, 1 in 5, 1 in 10 women, not a small number of women. And we just, our response is entirely inadequate. So let me just say that that's infuriating to me. It's affecting my gallbladder, and I'm just working harder to try to work at it. Um, Gallbladder is where you hold your anger, like your unexpressed anger. So here I am expressing it to you.
Yes,
So at
please
any
let it out.
rate, um, the all of those conditions. So whether it's recurrent UTIs, bacterial vaginosis, recurrent bacterial vaginosis, even like vulvar conditions, lichen sclerosis, vulvodynia, um, like I said, PCOS, endometriosis, pain with sex, infertility. I mean, I just could, the list goes on, right? That are very commonly diagnosed conditions. Cancers, many, many cancers, right? Reproductive cancers. And if you can believe it, that this is true, that we diagnose those conditions and we collect almost no data about what the microbiome of the vaginal area has to tell us when we make those diagnoses. So there are some tests in market that are whole genome sequencing testing, um, but doctors don't read whole genome sequencing because they provide relative abundance. They don't provide actual counts of bacteria. And that's what the medical profession uses both to diagnose and to prescribe. They need to see actual counts. So we developed a test that we're going to be offering on our Womankind Care platform that people will be able to take to doctors and say, okay, now can we think about what we should really do? Because it's 54 targets and it's all measured targets with actual counts that doctors will be able to see really the landscape of what's going on. So I feel really good about that. And we have that test in a national trial right now that we're collecting swabs on all those conditions I mentioned when the doctor diagnoses that condition. So that's the key, right? Because we know 2 out of 3 times women are being misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm super excited to see what we learn. And then when you take the test on the new platform, your test will sort of run through the data of this data set that we're collecting. So we'll really be able to be informative is my hope, right? I mean, we're still working on all this and I need to raise more money to do it, but I'm praying for a miracle. But so anyway, we're pretty excited about that. And I guess the key message in all of that is that the vaginal microbiome, just like our gut microbiome, so anything you ever learned about the gut microbiome, our vaginal microbiome impacts our health, our overall health, in the same way as our gut or our oral or our sinus microbiome. And in fact, that's one single microbiome, right? Like it's one single 3 pounds of bacteria that either keeps us healthy or makes us sick. So, like, we're still educating a lot of doctors to think about the vaginal microbiome, and I think that this study will help,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. It sounds like it certainly will, and I'm excited to see someone pushing this giant, what seems like a giant boulder uphill. And as we know, women's health has been very much understudied, um,
Underfunded.
underfunded. Yeah. And I grew up in a home where my mother was pretty homeopathic. And then as an adult, I started studying Ayurveda. And thankfully, in my study of Ayurveda, there was a big section of it that was focused on women's health. And it gave me alternative methodologies to treat myself in situations that my OBGYN wanted to do surgery on. So,
Mhm.
and
Good for you.
thank you. Yeah, I felt very lucky. God was looking out. It was like right at the perfect time. So my question for you in all of this is, how can women begin to understand and trust the intelligence of their own bodies, especially when it
That's a good
comes to vaginal
question.
health. Yeah.
Yes, such a good question because we're trained against that, right? I mean, we so many women have such a distant relationship to their own vaginas, right? Even as far as something like odor, right? Like which is a very common problem for so many women, and really, when we have bad odors, it usually is because there's an overgrowth of a certain kind of bacteria. And the different kinds of odors speak to the different bacterias there. Sometimes that's accompanied with a discharge, sometimes it's not, right? And so, what do women do but then use a deodorizing soap or some masking soap, which only gives more food to the bad bacteria, right? Like it actually makes the situation worse. Um, and so something simple, that's like a simple thing to know about yourself. Oh, this weird smell, and understand that the microbiome, whether we're talking about our gut or our vagina or our mouth, right? Like it's dynamic. So like if you've ever this happened to smelled somebody have really bad breath, it turns out they have a cavity, right? So there's all this decay going on. They get that cavity fixed and the odor in their mouth remarkably changes, right? But 50% of people walk around with an amazing amount of decay in their mouth, which drives like really serious diseases, diabetes,
Yes.
mental illness
Yes.
comes from decay in your mouth.
Yeah.
So, and we certainly have enough of that. Um, uh, but the same thing, to like, and we know when you have, your gut microbiome is like the engine, right? That drives the wheel, right? It's a very complex system. But when you have persistent gut issues, usually comes from your mouth, truthfully. But it's very difficult to turn around your microbiome vaginally because all these things are talking to each other, right?
Yeah.
So what I would say is that, in the ways that you talked about homeopathy and energetic medicines, whether Ayurveda, I spent some time in India and had some pretty remarkable healing and I actually work with Chinese medicine quite a lot, right? So there's many other methods of tying together what's happening in our physical body and maybe what's happening on our emotional or mental body, right? Or spiritual body, even for that matter. But even if you don't go that far, right? Like, can you just come to know what normal feels like, right? Can you just come to have a relationship enough with your vaginal health so that you know what a regular, like, because vaginas smell, usually they smell sweet, little sexy, musky, right? Like, but when it's off, then it starts to smell sour or um, like ammonia, like is very common, or just just like a smell that just smells sort of sick, you
Yeah.
know um and so if you smell that, then you think, oh, okay, like something's overgrowing there, right? And there's nothing, and that's common, that's more common for that to happen with women than it is for it to not to happen. Although we don't know why it's true, I think it's really important for your listeners to know that only 1/3 of women, we don't know how they got this lucky, have a really good, solid microbiome, which is to say that even after their period, after sex, after all these dynamic things, they keep coming back to a good microbiome. Um, Most of us are not that lucky. 1/3 of women never have the right bacteria. They're constantly shedding. And so those are the women that tend to have more and more complex conditions, right? Because they never have the right bacteria creating a system that is defensible, right? Because the microbiome's job, wherever we're talking about it, is the key immune function in our body, right? So if you're sick in your gut, you don't just maybe have digestion issues, right? But you're also way more susceptible to things like COVID or like any other viruses or infections, right? And your system doesn't have the right bacteria to really fight off these bad bugs, right? So a lot of times people think respiratory infections are like focused in your lungs or in your throat or whatever. But honestly, your gut has so much to do with whether those bacteria can take hold in those places, right?
Yeah.
And so same in your vaginal microbiome. If you constantly have bad bacteria living there and you're masking this odor, you know, that is really known to impact your fertility, right? Like just in the same way there's a gut brain, connection, there's also a vaginal biome brain connection. Why would your biome be sending messages of arousal if you have too much bad bacteria there, right? Like the body is really smart. And so I don't know that I'm answering your question very well, but I think this idea of learning to trust ourselves and know what we know, especially as women about our own body, is the greatest skill we can try to cultivate for ourselves, because it also allows us to trust what we know about how people are treating us, or about whether this job is the right fit for me, or whether this location is where I should be living. And at 63, like, I think I'm getting a lot better at it, right? I listen for my intuition all the time. Sometimes there's this lag, and I'm like, am I going the right way? Right? Like, for me, that's a prayer question too, right? When I don't know and I can't trust myself. Um, but but I think really giving ourselves permission to know what we know is probably the strongest thing we can do to protect our health.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can find doctors, like this one woman who was crying when I was talking to her. Literally, she went to 6 doctors, got on planes to go to doctors because she could not remedy this recurrent UTI thing. Every time she had sex with her husband, she got sick. Every single time. It was ruining her marriage. And this guy puts her on 3 of the most toxic antibiotics. So she's totally sick, right? And finally, at that breaking point, she's like, I have to figure this out myself. And she found us on Reddit. She found Good Clean Love on Reddit, and where a lot of people find Good Clean Love, actually. And she sent us this note about, like, literally, you saved my life. But really, she saved her own life, right? She saved her own life because she thought to herself, this is not the answer. This is I don't care if he's a doctor. He's not talking to me. He's not listening to me. And if I had a penny for every time a woman tells me that about, like, going to physicians that don't listen to them and don't believe them when they describe their symptoms, or just feel like, oh, I already told you what to do about that, right? Like, or I have women doctors who say, oh, like, these doctors just send me every single one of these patients because they don't want to see them. They won't see them. Women with vaginal issues, and realize that 3 in 5 visits to an OBGYN is for a vaginal infection. 3 in 5.
Yeah.
In this country, we spend $20 billion on inadequate solutions. But the more tragic, like, statistic is that because the vaginal area is so nerve rich, right? There's more nerves in that part of your body, that we lose $40 billion in productivity loss. So what does that mean? That's like the way you can be a mother. That's the way you can be a wife. That's the way you show up to work or don't, right? Like, I had norovirus recently, and usually I'm pretty good vaginally because I use our routine. But I got this terrible yeast infection. I couldn't identify it right away. And I'm just telling you, I didn't expect it. So I didn't know really to look what I was looking for. But literally a week and a half before I figured out what to do, I really couldn't focus on anything but my itch, you know? So it's like we minimize these things so much, but when you have them in a recurrent way and you can't get balanced, in that part of your body, it literally affects your whole life. So, like, if that's happening to you and you're listening to me, you are not crazy. And if you don't have a doctor who's really trying to help you figure out what's going on, think about trying to balance your own microbiome. And so, anyway, most women don't understand this and don't know that they can do this. But honestly, that is the magic of good, clean love,
Yeah. Yeah.
is that you can use a wash and a gel and a homeopathic suppository, which has native lactobacilli, and you can use that in a regimen just the same way you take care of your face or your skin. Um, and takes time. Doesn't happen overnight, right? But you can bring your microbiome back into balance by having good bacteria living there and keeping the pH low, which those other products do, the vaginal wash and the gel. If your body doesn't do it for you automatically, you can mimic what it's supposed to do, and women get better. Let me just say that.
Yeah. Well, in hearing you say all of that, what seems to be like the most prevalent, if I may, like myth or misinformation about vaginal care for women that to unlearn is that they have to rely upon a doctor and their advice. And I'm not saying don't go see your doctor, but there's so many different ways in which we can heal ourselves and really be our own healers. And all of my studies and trainings the last many years have taught me that, like, yes, there's experts that I go and I rely on, but it's my own intuitive knowing and self exploration and the mapping of my own body, my own energy field, etc., that then signals to me who to go and seek or what I actually might need. So when I'm sitting in that office or talking to the professional, whomever it may be, I come to them much more informed and have autonomy over my decision making, and not going to just trust blindly, because we've seen how that really does harm quite a
I
lot of
mean,
us.
so let's just say my husband's a doctor. He's an AMA doctor. He's a psychiatrist, right? So I married him before he went to medical school. So I had a front row seat to see what he learned. And they like half a day women's health,
Yeah.
half a day of
Hmm.
4 years of education. So they don't know about the microbiome.
Hmm.
A lot of them. I
Yeah.
mean, more and more younger doctors, women doctors especially, who are coming in to OBGYN practice, which is really a challenging practice to come into in many states in this country. So there are whole areas that are deserts that women cannot find care right now in this country. So I mean, that's a different problem. But but listen, here's the thing. If you have cancer, you want to go to an oncologist, right? If you break your arm, you want to there's some things that American medicine like does better than anyone, you know? But like if you're having an imbalance, and you keep getting the same medicine over and over again, and the imbalance is only getting worse, then you got to look a layer deeper.
Yeah.
And American medicine doesn't really do that because it doesn't have the tools, right? Like medicine, when you talk about Ayurveda or homeopathics, right? Like they all have their own philosophy and they have the tools that support that philosophy. So for homeopathics, right, the idea is that similars is like what heals you.
Yeah.
So you use a dose of arsenic when you have something that looks like arsenic poisoning, right? And it's like so dilute that you're not actually getting the arsenic. But so that's the tools. It's a much more subtle medicine, right? And honestly, I did homeopathics for years with my kids and still actually do that myself. Whenever you can work on your body on a subtle level, then it doesn't necessarily have to become like this really hard physical like layer, which is sort of the last way that your body screams at you. But because the microbiome is so dynamic, right? It's like nobody's done anything wrong. It's not like, oh, what's wrong with me that this keeps happening to me? Like that's the wrong way to think about it. But, like really like how you eat, what you eat every day, how much alcohol you use, do you get regular sleep? I mean, it's such basic stuff. People talk about it over and over again, and I feel sort of silly talking about it. But like honestly, like I wear this ring to find out like how, to really understand my sleep. Because like when I get to sleep for 8 hours, I'm a different woman, you
Yeah.
know? And I don't usually get to sleep 8 hours, but 7 is pretty good. Um, and so like that is like a high priority for my entire health, like how I think about my health, how I think about my capacity to do anything, right?
Yeah.
And my husband would tell me that like these people would come and they would want sleep medicine, just as an example. And then he would say, well, what's your night routine? And they're like drinking Mountain Dew and watching horror films until 1 in the morning. And they haven't gone for a walk all day, you
Exactly.
know? I mean,
Yeah.
this is true stories. So it's like how we live in our body, what we put in our body is literally what we are made of.
Yeah.
So this is turning into a much more philosophical conversation, but this is true about your vaginal health, right? Like if you use products that are just full of chemicals that are designed to cover things up, or that just really the people making those products have not thought about what that area needs, right? They're just using cheap propylene glycol or polyethylene glycol products that are very inexpensive to come by, and really that's brake fluid and antifreeze that they use in lubricants. um, I mean, there are some new lubricants on the market. I won't mention any brands, but we study these things that are more hyperosmolar, which means that they're heavier than antifreeze.
Yeah.
And so antifreeze and brake fluid works in a car for all the normal reasons. Um, but when you put it in your vagina, it strips your vaginal lining and the immune function of your vaginal lining in less than 4 hours. And I could show you pictures that prove it. Um, so, um,
So yeah, I'd
so
love to move into the talking more about your actual products. I know you touched on a specific kit, but maybe we could go in that area because I think there's a lot in the name of the company. But yeah, I would love to know like how you came up with the name,
sure.
what Clean Love means beyond the brand, and then really diving into more of the products that are there. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, so we started as a lubricant company, right? Sexual health, and we had love oils and other pleasure mechanisms, mostly now on shelf. If you think good, clean love, what you'll see a lot of, in most stores, we just got into Walmart. Hallelujah. That took me half my life. But I'm super excited to be in Walmart. And so, so, so those lubricants, Almost Naked, BioNude, we have a wide range of lubricants. They're all made in this patented biomatch way, which is to say that it's designed to support your vaginal microbiome 3 ways. First, it doesn't disrupt. It doesn't cause you to shed your vaginal lining. So that's huge, right? Because 95% of the products on the market do that. And once you shed your vaginal lining, you've pushed the pH up, you have all this excess moisture. Whatever product you think is going to work for you, it can't do that because you've disrupted the environment so totally that you can't moisturize, you can't pH balance, you can't do any of that stuff. But our products, because we don't disrupt, we can regulate the pH. So then we bring the pH down with our proprietary form of lactic acid to the level that where only good bacteria can live. So when you're creating the pH level for good bacteria, which is very low, actually almost as low as your gut, 3.7, right? That's the ideal range. Then these good bacteria can start to thrive there. and all the bad bacteria slowly die off, right? So you're really like building a new house from the inside out. And then that lactic acid that I mentioned also feeds the healthy lactobacilli in a way that many women's bodies, like, remember I was telling you that 2/3 women don't have the right lactose. So if they don't have the mechanism to nourish those lactobacilli. Again, we know this is true. We don't fully understand why it's true for so many women. But the product does it for you, right? So then this really good, healthy lactobacilli can hang out there. That's even true about any lubricant you use at Good Clean Love. And so, so the lubricants are great. And many people come to Good Clean Love through lubricants. And then they're like, whoa, this is such a different experience than most products in the market, that they start to look at our feminine hygiene line. So that's like wash, wipes, and vaginal gels. And also there's a relief gel for itching and pain. And we have a lot of products, but all of the products are made just the way I just explained to you. So they don't disrupt. And because they don't disrupt, they pH balance, really reducing the pH over time for a long period of time. And then if you use the suppository, then you can get good, healthy lactobacilli in there. And so if women are listening and they're really struggling, that's what I would recommend them to use. And Good, I was the very first brand that used Good. Um, and now all these brands have stolen my Good, which, you can't really protect Good. But the idea of Good Clean Love actually used to be Good Clean Fun at a moment, but somebody else owned Good Clean Fun. And then I thought, really, the whole thing is about love, right?
Mm-hmm.
But clean, what that means to me is that it's my job to make it safe for you to use this product. And really, everyone who makes products should have that job, but many of them don't. But that is like literally the base ethic,
Yeah.
that first, do no harm in
Right.
medicine, right? Like, if I can't use it, I won't sell it.
Right.
And my bar is pretty high, right? From all the children and operations and all that. So, I still innovate on all of our products. And uh, I'm pretty much the one that sort of oversees the regulatory um, and conceives of. So we're going to make a vaginal deodorant, right?
Okay.
So now this all over body deodorant is like everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Because people are so terrified of their odor, which again, if you've got good bacteria living on you, you just smell like yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's about what do you eat, when do you sleep, all of those things, right?
Yeah.
But we're making a vaginal deodorant that is healthy and will support your vaginal microbiome to do more of what it's supposed to do, and it'll be the only one on the market to do that. Um,
Fantastic. Yeah.
yeah.
And what has it been like and continues to be like to hold both scientific rigor and spiritual reverence for women's bodies in a business world where, profit is, you can't have a business unless you have profit, right?
Yeah, and we've lost a lot of money lately, so I know a lot about that. Um, it's so. Let me just say that consumer business is a very challenging business because it's really hard to have a great idea and execute it into something that you ship all over the country or potentially all over the world.
Mm.
It's very different than a software business that just does stuff on a screen.
Yeah.
The product is not really a product. So I'm a little offended, or if it's a financial company and they're moving money around on paper, right? Like that's not actually making something. So
Mm-hmm.
let me just say that it is really hard to make things in the world. And all of this stuff that we're experiencing about supply chain is because we make everything in America, and we always have made everything in America. And I did that way before it was in vogue and Trump and his insanity, um, because I really felt like we need to know how to make things here. It was just a principle I had. And I'd also heard a lot of horror stories of buying things from China, and I just was like, not doing that. So for many, many years, we've had our own supply chain. where we touch every single part of what we make. And it's only gotten harder, truthfully, over the years. So it takes a lot of spiritual reverence to trust that the universe will continue to support your work, you know. And we've always really tried to make a value product that anyone could have access to at Good Clean Love, with the very highest scientific criteria, but that it's still affordable for anybody who needs that help.
Yeah.
And I have to say that it's increasingly hard to do that. And we are continuously battling to find the places where that can work. Um, so I don't want to go too deep into running a business, but if you want to have another call about that, we can. I really believe that what we do not see in the world, um, and what we what we pray to is the most real thing.
Mm.
And I lost my son in 2018, and I spent a month in India after that time, and that confirmed for me, without any shadow of a doubt, that when people die, they don't just disappear.
Yeah.
That was already my religion, but it I talk to my son all the time, albeit differently. But I still miss him and grieve him, not being here on this in this space with me. And I've had many other situations that has literally brought me to my knees, and all I could do was pray. And honestly, when you're in that situation, if you're lucky, what you realize is that you hope you never get to a moment where you're not praying like that again. And it's so easy when things are just moving along to think, oh, I don't need to pray. But honestly, we need to pray like that all the time, right? Like
Hmm.
literally on our knees.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, I really should do that more right now. But,
Mhm.
um, like I said, I really take my work uh, as the greatest spiritual blessing of my life. That I get to do something that matters so much, that heals people that I might never meet, you know, that changes lives around those people, right?
Yep.
And allows me to learn who I am, right? Because I do love inventing stuff, right? Like I'm that early entrepreneur, and I'm not so good at the follow through parts. Luckily we have a lot of people who are really amazingly talented who are doing all that. But I do want to, before we run out of time, shout out my newest platform, which is called Womankind Care. And honestly, I've been working on this since COVID. So, because all the doctors that I knew that are part of our clinical trials were telling me over and over again how they can't see their patients. And all these women who were struggling, really struggling in that time, unable to get any kind of care. And so I had thought for a long time, how could I deliver something, right? And so then I spent years developing this test that I knew doctors would read because they told me they would read it. And then we've developed a much more elevated protocol system. So like where Good Clean Love, you have to go and try to find what you need, partly because I sell in so many stores nationwide. I can't make protocols on Good Clean Love, right? The FDA doesn't let me do that. But on Womankind Care, I have more latitude because there's going to be a medical component, where you can also talk to a doctor about your test on that website.
Fantastic.
Um, and so this is my last gift to the world, I think.
Mm.
And I'm praying that the universe has one more miracle for me that I can get this funded. But I've been building the website with our previous investment, and it's really so beautiful. And I'm just so I just tear up when I see it because I think how many people are gonna feel better from
Yeah.
finding this.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm overwhelmingly touched and expanded through this conversation with you, Wendy, and feeling the magnificence of your energy and your heart and the care that you clearly have for all that you're doing for so many of us. So I know we're kind of coming to a close, but I do want to ask you just a few more questions. The first being one I love asking every single guest, which is if you could go back in time and give a younger Wendy some words of wisdom, what would you say, and to what age would Wendy be?
I mean, I wish I could have told this to myself when I was 4 years old, right?
Yeah.
But certainly again at 16 and 24 and, it's like this too will pass,
Mm.
right? Like whatever this terrible, scary thing is that you're in, this is not the truth of you or your life, right? Takes a
Yeah.
long time to learn that. And that the way you think is your life. So I've been studying that Buddha teaching, right? Like we are what we think. With our thoughts we make the world, and there's nothing more true than that, right? So I mean, I feel like you have to teach yourself that for your entire life, right?
Yeah.
But I really try hard to hold myself in those moments where I'm really afraid or I can't see the future. I can't forget about the future. Like the other thing that I feel like I learned that I wish I had known earlier is that we don't get a long path in front of us. We get a step. So, like, what is the step you can see that you can trust right now? Whether that's dealing with your vaginal health or dealing with your sick mother or dealing with your marriage that's maybe not where you want it to be. Like, what is it that in my mind, how do I want to think about this? And what is the one step that I can take to do that? And
Yeah.
my son, I was just before I spoke to you, it's lovely when your children grow up and they can give you your wisdom back. And I'm looking at like making this move, selling my house that I built this place. And he's like, Mom, it's like it's not like a permanent thing. If it's not the right thing, you can do something else, you know, which is like what I've been teaching him his whole life. Um, So, that gets back to what we were saying earlier, right? Like about trusting, your own knowing, trusting that there's a voice that's not your own, that's in you that you can listen for.
I think the key with that is just allowing space to actually hear the voice. Stop filling it with your life with noise and distraction. And a little bit of spaciousness allows a lot of intuitive guidance to come through. And I've really, really enjoyed hearing a bit about your business and your own personal magic. It's very apparent that you are deep within a beautiful practice, and it's been an honor sharing space with you. And before we go, just want to open the floor if there's anything else you'd like to share in
Well,
addition to where everyone can find you and your work.
yeah, so I'm going to send you a code. We'll probably call it your website 20 or something,
Mhm.
where your listeners can go and try some of those products that I was describing on Good Clean Love. So goodcleanlove.com. They can also go look at some of our work at vaginalbiomescience.com. And there's blogs everywhere. I was very prolific for a period of time, so there's a lot of writing. I have a couple books about sex, one called Sex That Works, one called Love That Works. They're both on Amazon too, however you do your reading. If you read, please try to read. Um, and and I also am like doing this TikTok craziness, so you can like you can find me teaching about vaginal health in all kinds of ways on TikTok and Instagram. And so if it's meaningful to you, then, follow me because we're trying to like do that. But
Yeah.
I don't even know, whatever. So you can see me in a lot of places.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Wendy, for being here. And thank you to the
So
beautiful
enjoyed
audience.
the chat,
Yeah.
really. It was really lovely and always good to find another magical presence in the world.
Yeah.
Because really that's like what makes the world, right? And that's fundamentally what love is, honestly, right? Like love is that alchemy when you talk about being a mystical alchemist, right? That is like where it's rooted in each of us. And so I was a loveologist before all of this. And because I really do believe that it's only by like retrieving and cultivating our capacity for love that we can save ourselves.
Mm, mm. That lands in my heart so well, and I appreciate your love being your religion. I always tell people I'm a disciple of love, and
Mhm.
it's just so
I
many
mean,
things.
actually, if you study religion, that
Hmm.
is the root of every single religion. And even this new pope from America,
Hmm.
like he's all about like love them, like
Yep.
love everybody. That's what Jesus said.
Yep. Yep.
So
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm. Well, with that,
Hey,
thank you
thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Hmm.
Really, really appreciate it. Would love to do this again. So if ever, like, after your sabbatical and you take some time off, hopefully with a prayer from my mouth to God's ears, Womankind Care will be live, and we can do another one. We can kind of talk more about that.
I love that. Yeah, we'll have a celebration episode. So everyone, please stay tuned to what's happening with Wendy, with Good Clean Love, all the other amazing ways in which you can connect with her work. And as always, I encourage you to share this episode with other listeners. We need more women taking ownership of their bodies, their financials, their spirituality, their just everything to make radical change. And it all starts with sharing messages like this, sharing that there are alternatives to expansion. So thank you all. Love you. See you next time.